Ladies and gentlemen, what if the detours in your life were not mistakes? What if the silence, the closed doors, the unexpected turns were all signs of something greater at work? Imagine a kind of guidance that doesn't always explain itself but never leads you wrong. When God leads, life may not get easier, but it becomes unmistakably sacred. When God leads, his direction often defies human logic. It is one of the most bewildering, yet consistent, aspects of divine guidance. The paths he takes us on tend not to align with what the world calls sensible or efficient. This is not due to some flaw or confusion in the heavenly mind, but rather because God is working with a perspective so much wider than our own that what appears crooked to us may be straight from his eternal vantage point. Consider how we, in our limited view, measure progress: straight lines, short distances, clear goals, minimum discomfort. We crave predictability. We want signs and certainty, not mystery. But God does not navigate like a businessman chasing a quarterly goal. He moves like an artist painting a mural, or a gardener cultivating a tree slowly, patiently, deliberately. His concern is not merely to get us there to some destination of success or happiness, but to make us into someone who is ready for that place when we arrive. This is precisely why his guidance feels so confusing. We are looking for a shortcut. He is looking for a transformation. What we call delay, he calls preparation. What we think is misdirection, he uses as formation. His purpose in leading us is not to cater to our sense of efficiency, but to root out the false wisdom of the world that lives within us. Take, for example, the biblical stories of divine calling. Rarely does God call someone into something they immediately understand. Abraham is asked to leave his home without being told where he's going. Moses is asked to confront Pharaoh despite his stutter and reluctance. David is anointed king but returns to shepherding sheep. Mary is chosen to carry the Son of God, not to a throne room, but to a stable. At every point, divine leadership turns conventional wisdom upside down. If these people had leaned solely on what made sense, they would have walked away from their callings. This is where the real test lies, in our demand for clarity. We often pray for God to lead, but deep down, we're really asking him to agree with our plans. We hope he will bless what we already intend to do. And when he doesn't, when the doors close, when the detours stretch too long, we begin to suspect something is wrong, not with our assumptions, but with him. But perhaps the wrongness we feel is not a flaw in his guidance, but the discomfort of having our illusions dismantled. Human logic, while a gift, is not omniscient. It operates within a narrow scope, what we can see, measure, and anticipate. Divine wisdom, on the other hand, sees through the surface of things. It knows what lies behind the next bend. It sees the cracks in the foundation we've built our confidence upon. When God leads, he often leads in ways that force us to walk by trust rather than by sight, not because he enjoys confusing us, but because he desires intimacy, dependence, and growth. If his leading always made sense, we would follow him for the comfort of the path, not the love of the shepherd. This is a hard lesson for those raised on self-reliance. We are taught to calculate, to strategize, to be in control. But divine leadership is more like following a whisper in the fog than walking a well-lit road. It calls for surrender, not just of actions but of assumptions. It invites us to admit that we don't know what's best for us, not fully, and to lay down our need to always understand. When God leads in ways that confound our reasoning, it is not because he is irrational, but because he is immeasurably wise. What feels like backward motion may be the groundwork for a leap we could never have engineered ourselves. What seems like loss may be the removal of something that was silently enslaving us. What appears to be delay may be the exact pace at which our soul can grow without breaking. So we walk, not always knowing, often questioning, sometimes doubting, but still walking, because even when it doesn't make sense to us, there is one who knows the way. When God leads, suffering becomes sanctified, This does not mean that suffering disappears or that the pain becomes easier to bear in the moment. Rather, it means that pain is no longer random or meaningless. It is taken up into the hands of the one who knows how to turn ashes into beauty, how to bring resurrection out of crucifixion. Suffering, when touched by divine purpose, is no longer just something we endure, it becomes something through which we are transformed. This is one of the more difficult truths to accept, because pain naturally feels like something that should be avoided or escaped. We instinctively recoil from it, trying to reason it away or pray it away. And yet some of the most profound growth in the soul happens not in seasons of ease, but in moments of grief, loss, or hardship. When God is leading, these moments are not detours from the spiritual journey, they are the journey. They become tools in His workshop, chisels in the hand of the sculptor, shaping us into the image we were always meant to bear. There is a temptation to believe that suffering is a sign of divine displeasure. Many people, in the face of trials, begin to ask questions like, "What did I do wrong?" or "Has God abandoned me?" But the very life of Christ shows otherwise. The most obedient man who ever walked the earth was also the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. His path led through pain, not around it. His obedience led him to a cross, not a throne, at least not immediately. If suffering could be sanctified in the life of Christ, then surely it can be in ours as well. The key difference lies in the presence of purpose. Without God, pain feels like a cruel accident, a meaningless interruption in our pursuit of happiness. But under divine leadership becomes an arena of refinement. Fire in itself can destroy or purify, depending on how it is used. In God's hands, suffering is not a fire that consumes, but one that refines. It burns away illusions, pride, self-sufficiency, and shallow hopes. It exposes what is fragile and false, so that something eternal might take root in its place. People often find, after going through deep trials, that they emerge with a kind of wisdom they never had before. They speak with more gentleness, live with more humility, love with more sincerity. Why is that? Because suffering, when given over to God, has the power to deepen us. It quiets our noisy assumptions. It slows us down. It creates space for honesty and dependence. In the stillness of pain, we are more likely to hear the voice that was always speaking, but that we were too busy or self-assured to notice. This process is not passive. It requires a kind of active surrender. There is a way to suffer that hardens the heart, and there is a way to suffer that opens it. The difference lies in whether or not we allow God to meet us there. He does not often snatch us out of the fire, but He always enters it with us. And that presence, silent, mysterious, sometimes hidden but always real, changes everything. It does not remove the ache, but it gives it shape. It does not erase the tears, but it collects them. Even suffering itself becomes a kind of offering. Sometimes we look back on seasons of hardship with a strange mixture of pain and gratitude, not because we enjoyed the suffering, but because we can see what it made possible. We see the fruit that could not have grown in sunnier soil. We see the character formed in the shadows. We see the closeness with God that only came when every other light went out. And we begin to understand what the saints and poets meant when they said that suffering can be a severe mercy. Under God's leadership, our wounds do not vanish, but they are no longer signs of defeat. They become marks of grace. Like the scars on the resurrected Christ, they tell a story not only of pain, but of redemption. They show that suffering was real, but it was not the end. They whisper of a deeper reality, that in the hands of God, even our darkest hours can be used for good, and even our most broken places can become holy ground. When God leads, there is peace amidst the storm. This peace is unlike anything the world offers or understands. It does not come from a change in circumstances or the absence of difficulty. It flows from the presence of God Himself, quiet, steady, and unwavering even when everything around is in turmoil. This peace does not depend on clear skies, calm waters, or a predictable journey. It can exist right in the middle of chaos, confusion, and fear. This idea challenges the way we usually think about peace. For most people, peace is tied to control, when things go as planned, when our surroundings are quiet, when we are free from conflict or pressure. We chase after peace by organizing our lives, reducing risk, and avoiding discomfort. And yet, even when we achieve a fragile sense of order, the peace we build often shatters the moment something unexpected happens. It is not strong enough to carry us through the deep waters of life. It is a temporary illusion. But the peace God gives is something entirely different. It is not something we produce or manage. It is something He plants within us. It can grow in the most unlikely soil. It has nothing to do with external control and everything to do with internal surrender. This peace is the result of trust not in a plan, but in a person. It comes when we begin to believe, deeply and truly, that we are not alone, that we are not abandoned, and that the one who leads us is both wise and good, even when we do not understand the way. There is a moment in the Gospels that captures this truth with stunning clarity. Jesus is in a boat with His disciples, and a great storm breaks out. The waves are crashing, the wind is howling, and the boat begins to fill with water. The disciples, seasoned fishermen familiar with the sea, are terrified, and yet Jesus is asleep. He is at rest in the middle of the chaos. When they wake Him, shouting in fear, He does not begin by calming the sea. He first asks, "Why are you afraid?" The question itself is the lesson. His presence in the boat should have been enough, even before the wind ceased. The peace He carried within Him was not based on the weather, but on the unshakable reality of who He was and who His Father is. When God leads, He does not always calm the storm outside, but He offers us the same calm within. This inner peace is not a denial of the difficulty. It does not pretend everything is fine when it isn't. It acknowledges the storm, feels the weight of it, and still remains anchored. That anchoring comes not from understanding all that is happening, but from knowing who holds the story. It is the kind of peace that allows someone to walk through grief without being consumed, to face uncertainty without panic, to stand in the middle of loss and still sing, even if softly. This peace is a fruit, not a formula. It grows through repeated encounters with God in the dark. It is not always immediate. Sometimes it comes slowly, like the first light at dawn. Sometimes it comes in silence, when the prayers have run out and there is nothing left to say. And sometimes it surprises us how, even in the middle of difficulty, we suddenly realize we are not afraid, or that we have not given up, or that somehow, against all odds, hope remains. God's peace is both tender and strong. It does not erase emotion, it holds it. It does not demand performance, it invites trust. It often comes when we finally stop striving to fix everything ourselves, when we stop asking why and begin to ask who is with me in this, who is guiding me through this, who can I lean on when I can no longer stand. When He leads, peace is not a reward for perfect faith, it is a gift for honest dependence. It may not remove the storm, but it carries us through it with a steadiness that is not our own. It is the peace that guarded the hearts of saints in prison cells and prophets in caves. It is the peace that surpasses understanding, not because it makes sense, but because it comes from somewhere beyond sense, from the deep, eternal heart of God Himself. When God leads, He begins to transform our desires. This transformation is not forced or mechanical. It is subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, like a small shift in the direction of a river's current. We begin our journey with many wants, some noble, some shallow, some rooted in fear or pride. We chase success, comfort, recognition, security, pleasure. We pray, yes, but often we do so with a shopping list of things we hope God will approve and provide. In our hearts, we are often more committed to our desired outcomes than to the one we are following. Yet, as He leads, something mysterious begins to happen. We begin to want differently. This shift is not always immediate. Often we do not even realize it is happening until we look back. It may begin with a quiet discontent, a restlessness with the very things we once pursued so passionately. The career that once defined our identity no longer satisfies in the same way. The approval of others, once vital to our sense of worth, begins to feel empty. The pleasures that once offered escape no longer deliver the same thrill. Something inside us has begun to awaken not to new ambitions, but to deeper longings. When God leads, He doesn't just change our circumstances, He begins to remake our hearts. He is not interested in decorating the surface of our lives. His concern is with the roots, those hidden places where our desires are formed and shaped. And because He is a God of truth, He gently confronts the false cravings that have controlled us, the hunger for control, the addiction to comparison, the thirst for affirmation, the obsession with comfort. He does not remove them with violence, but with something far more powerful: love. As we come to know Him more, we slowly begin to realize that what we thought we needed was never enough, and that what we truly needed has always been Him. This transformation of desire is a mark of true spiritual maturity. It is not about becoming more religious or adopting a list of moral behaviors. It is about the reordering of the heart. Where once we might have pursued blessings as proof of God's favor, we begin to desire the blesser more than the blessings. Where once we might have served in hopes of reward, we begin to serve out of love. Where once we might have prayed for ease, we begin to pray for strength. Our appetites begin to change not because we have disciplined ourselves into better behavior, but because we have tasted something richer, deeper, more satisfying than anything this world can offer. There is a certain grief that comes with this transformation. Some dreams must die. Some plans must be released. Sometimes what we wanted so desperately does not come to pass, and we are left with confusion, even heartbreak. But this too is part of the shaping. In those moments of disappointment, when God does not give us what we asked for, He may be offering something far better, Himself. And over time we begin to see that losing certain desires was not loss at all, but rescue. This new desire is not always dramatic. It often looks ordinary, a quiet contentment in the unnoticed moments, a growing hunger for truth, a willingness to serve without being seen, a desire to love more than to be loved. And yet these are signs of deep inner change. The soul is learning to breathe in a new atmosphere, to feed on a different kind of nourishment. The eternal is replacing the temporary. The holy is replacing the hollow. Eventually, this transformation of desire touches every part of our lives. The way we spend our time, the way we speak, the way we treat others, it all begins to reflect this inward change. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but unmistakably. We begin to want what God wants, not out of duty, but out of alignment. His will no longer feels like an interruption to our plans, it becomes our plan. And even when we fall short, we find ourselves returning more quickly, more honestly, because we know now that His way is not only right, but good. The heart, once a battlefield of conflicting desires, starts to find its center, not because it has been silenced, but because it has been filled with a longing that leads us home. When God leads, doors close that we thought should open. These closed doors often come with confusion, disappointment, and at times, even a sense of betrayal. We had plans. We prayed sincerely. We saw a clear path ahead. Everything seemed to align until it didn't. Suddenly, the opportunity disappears. The relationship ends. The job is lost. The approval is denied. And we are left standing before a door we believed was ours, now shut tight, wondering why God would lead us this far only to let it slip away. But divine leadership is not always about moving forward. Sometimes it is about restraint. The hand of God guides not only by opening but also by withholding. What feels like a denial may, in reality, be a protection. What seems like a missed opportunity might be God redirecting us from something we cannot yet see. His no is not always a rejection of us. It can be an invitation to trust Him more deeply, beyond the realm of what makes sense to our understanding. We are accustomed to measuring progress by open doors. We see advancement, opportunity, affirmation, and ease as signs of favor. But God's definition of progress is different. He is not trying to give us a life of uninterrupted success. He is forming character, shaping faith, and guiding us toward purposes that often require detours, pauses, and redirections. When He closes a door, He is not merely blocking a path. He is teaching us how to follow without clinging to our own map. It is easy to mistake closed doors for failure. The world teaches us that if we just try hard enough, believe strongly enough, or plan carefully enough, we can achieve whatever we desire. But God is not bound by the formulas of human effort. He sees the whole story, not just the chapter we're in. What we call failure may be the very way He removes something that would have taken us in the wrong direction. He may be saving us from success that would have corrupted us, relationships that would have drained us, or platforms that would have elevated our pride but weakened our soul. These moments of divine refusal are deeply personal. They test the heart. They reveal what we truly believe about God. Do we trust Him only when things go our way, or do we believe He is good even when the path feels disappointing? Will we still follow when the road leads to obscurity rather than recognition? These are not theoretical questions. They become real when we are standing before a shut door, knocking with all our might, and receiving silence in return. But in that silence, something sacred can happen. If we listen long enough, we begin to hear another voice, not one of rejection, but of redirection. We begin to realize that God's love is not proven by giving us everything we want, but by leading us toward what is truly best, even when it contradicts our expectations. This realization does not come quickly. It often grows in the soil of disappointment, watered by tears. But over time, we begin to see that closed doors are not signs of God's absence. They are evidence of His careful, intentional involvement in every step of our lives. There are stories we only understand in hindsight. A dream that had to die so a deeper calling could live. A relationship that ended so that healing could begin. A plan that unraveled so that dependence could be born. At the time, it felt like everything was falling apart. But later we begin to see that things were actually falling into place, just not the place we imagined. The challenge is to trust God not only with what He gives, but with what He withholds. This kind of trust is not built on outcomes, but on relationship. It is not the trust of a business transaction. It is the trust of a child holding the hand of a father who sees further down the road. It says, "Even if I don't understand, I know you do." And that is enough. In the end, divine leadership is not about reaching every door we desire. It is about becoming the kind of person who can walk through the right door at the right time, prepared, shaped, and deeply rooted in the one who never closes a door without reason and never leads without purpose. When God leads, we begin to see life with new eyes. The world does not change in its appearance. The sky remains blue. People still speak with the same voices. The days pass in their familiar rhythm, but something within us shifts. It is as though the soul has been given a different lens, one that reveals depth, where we once saw only surface, one that captures light, even in places we assumed were shadows. This vision is not physical but spiritual, and it begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, growing clearer with every step we take in surrender. At first, we do not notice this change. We may still react to things as we always have, driven by habit, expectation, and old fears. But slowly, under the gentle pressure of God's hand, the eyes of the heart begin to open. We start to see patterns we overlooked before: a providential meeting, a seemingly random delay, a word of encouragement spoken at just the right moment. What once appeared as coincidence now shimmers with a quiet purpose. What once seemed ordinary begins to carry the fragrance of the eternal. This is not merely about positive thinking or optimism. It is a deeper kind of awareness. When God leads, He reveals the unseen workings of grace beneath the events of our lives. We begin to recognize His fingerprints in both the smooth and the jagged moments. We see that the waiting seasons are not wasted but pregnant with preparation. We see that even setbacks carry instruction. We begin to understand that nothing is truly random in the hands of the one who leads us. With new eyes, people also look different. Those we once ignored, we now notice. Those we judged harshly, we begin to understand. Compassion replaces indifference. Humility replaces assumption. We realize that each soul we encounter is a mystery known and loved by God, carrying wounds we may never see and hope we might help awaken. Our perspective moves from self-centered to God-centered, and from there to others-centered. We start to ask not just how does this affect me, but what is God doing here, and how can I join Him in it? This spiritual vision also changes how we view time. Without God, we often live in a rush grasping for the future, haunted by the past. But when God leads, we start to live in the present with greater attention. We no longer measure our days only by their productivity, but by their faithfulness. A quiet hour of prayer, a simple act of service, a gentle word of forgiveness, these moments take on weight and beauty. The sacredness of now becomes more apparent because we are no longer chasing a life of meaning, we are receiving it, one moment at a time, from the hands of the giver. Even suffering, through this lens, is seen differently. We do not minimize the pain or deny the sorrow, but we perceive something deeper running through it, God's nearness, His shaping, His promise. We see how trials refine the soul, how darkness can reveal a clearer light, how even brokenness can lead to deeper communion with the one who was broken for us. This does not make suffering easy, but it makes it bearable. It gives it meaning. It prevents despair. New vision also brings a longing for more, not in the sense of dissatisfaction, but in the sense of awakening. The more we see, the more we realize how much there is yet to see. We become seekers not of novelty, but of truth. The scriptures come alive. Words we've read many times now breathe with freshness. Creation speaks with renewed wonder. A sunset becomes a sermon. A bird's flight a metaphor for trust. The silence of night a reminder of God's watchful presence. The world, once muted, now sings. This change in vision is not something we can manufacture. It is not a result of effort alone, but of grace that flows when we follow, when we trust, when we yield. It is the gift given to those who walk closely, who are willing to let God disrupt their assumptions and remake their perspective. As we grow in intimacy with Him, our eyes are slowly trained to see as He sees, not just what is, but what could be, not just the visible, but the eternal threaded through it. And so life, under His leadership, becomes more than a series of tasks or destinations. It becomes a journey of sight, a pilgrimage of perception. And the more we see, the more we are drawn not just to the path ahead, but to the one who walks beside us, who has opened our eyes to beauty we never knew was there. When God leads, life is not spared from storms, losses, delays, or disappointments, but it is infused with meaning, peace, clarity, and transformation that cannot be manufactured by human will. We find ourselves being slowly changed, not into something new, but into who we were always meant to be. The journey is not always comfortable, but it is always purposeful. We begin to walk not by sight, but by trust. We learn to release what we thought we needed, to receive what He knows we need. Our desires are purified, our vision sharpened, and our hearts steadied by a peace the world cannot give. We begin to see with new eyes, love with new hearts, and live with new courage, not because the path is easy, but because we no longer walk it alone. When God leads, everything may not make sense, but everything matters. And somehow, in ways we can't always explain, we are exactly where we are supposed to be.